Hello, everyone. Welcome in. Welcome in. As you're joining us, please put in the chat where you're calling in from. We would love to see where our community is. I'm going to go ahead and get started because we have a jam-packed session today. So hello, everyone, and welcome to the Rematriate and Rise, addressing workplace harm and healing as women of color in engineering. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Kanasia Thompson, and I have the privilege of serving as the programs manager for the Women of Color in Engineering Collaborative. As mentioned, please share with us if you're just joining, share with us in the chat where you're tuning in from. I would like to take a moment to acknowledge the struggle for liberation, both domestically and abroad, that affect women of color acutely. The conflicts that we are witnessing across the globe all contribute to the mass disabling of vulnerable populations, leaving them with little to no support, and the systems of oppression that we rally against in our day-to-day lives seek to encourage us to remain unacknowledged and unaddressed. Naming this is just the beginning of dismantling these systems, and the responsibility remains on all of us to keep pushing forward. I would also like to acknowledge that I'm speaking to you all from the sovereign and stolen indigenous lands that was forcefully developed by and built upon the backs of enslaved people, otherwise known as North Carolina. If this is your first time joining us, this webinar is a part of our regular program offerings by the WCEC, which is a collaborative of more than 20 STEM-based organizations and associations, all working to reshape the landscape of engineering to be a more diverse, inclusive, and supportive industry where every woman of color in engineering feels a profound sense of belonging and where her talents are celebrated, where she's empowered to lead, innovate, and thrive. That's our collective mission. This specific webinar focuses on a strategic priority of reducing microaggressions, racism, and sexism in the workplace for women of color engineers. We welcome you to join the work of the WCEC. Our website link is now being dropped in the chat. And I'm joined in this work with our project director, Dr. Lola Rodriguez Vargas, our database and diversity specialist, Dr. Ashley Woodson Walters, our principal investigator, Dr. Roberta Rincon from the Society of Women Engineers, and our co-PIs, Dr. Dinah Martinez from the Society of Hispanic Professional Engineers, Dr. Stephanie Page from the Women in Engineering Proactive Network, Dr. Rochelle Williams from the Graduate Fellowship for STEM Diversity representing the National Society of Black Engineers, and Dr. Tiffany Smith from Advancing Indigenous People in STEM, who just happens to be our moderator for today. So I want to thank ACES for collaborating with us on this webinar. A few housekeeping items before I pass it off to Tiffany to open us up. This webinar is being recorded and you all will have first access to it, the replay via email, via our website, and via our social media platforms, which you'll all get the links here shortly. If you would like to enable closed captioning, that option is available by clicking the CC icon that should be at the bottom of your Zoom window. There will be a Q&A session at the conclusion of this presentation, so please place all of your questions in that Q&A tool at the bottom of the Zoom window. We are highly encouraging comments, conversations, all that good jazz in the chat. So if you do decide to participate, please share from a personal experience and please do not share stories from others that did not give you the consent to make public. At the end, we will be providing a survey link at the end of the session where you can tell us all about your experience, how we can improve, and what other offerings you would like to see for future webinars. I did want to make a special announcement that today is the deadline to apply for our inaugural travel stipend program. The application closes at 5 p.m. Central Standard Time. You can check out our website for more information about that, but we would love for you all to apply. Those funds are up to $3,000 for professional development opportunities for women of color engineers to attend any opportunity that will speak to advancement or retention in the field. But what you all came for, I'm now going to introduce our moderator for today's webinar, Dr. Tiffany Smith, she, her, hers. Dr. Smith is a citizen of the Cherokee Nation of Oklahoma and is also a descendant of the Muskogee Creek Nation, where her scholarship focuses on utilizing indigenous methodologies and her own Jaligi Cherokee epistemology in seeking to decolonize academic spaces, particularly those in STEM fields. Dr. Smith serves as the Director of Research and Career Support for ACES, where she manages and executes several grant-supported research-related projects that share the experiences of Indigenous STEM students and professionals, such as the Rematriation Program to support the advancement of Indigenous women in STEM. Dr. Smith has worked for nearly two decades in various aspects of higher education as an expert in Indigenous higher education and methodologies, and has been invited to speak for several education associations, including currently virtually teaching in the Higher Education Administration program at the University of Alabama at Birmingham, and speaking at the National Academies of Science. She was honored as a 2024 NASPA Pillar of the Profession, which recognizes a series of distinguished individuals who have served as leaders, teachers, and scholars in student affairs and higher education. She is currently co-editing a book on Indigenous leadership in higher education set to come out next year, so make sure y'all hop on top of that, please. She hopes that her work will contribute to dismantling deficient narratives and holding institutions and organizations accountable for providing culturally relevant support and space for Indigenous people. Dr. Smith currently lives in Oklahoma with her partner, Zach, and her two children. So I'm excited to now pass it over to Dr. Smith because I feel like I've been yapping for a long time. So Dr. Smith, can you take it away?
Absolutely. Wado, Mavito. Thanks for that introduction, Kanisha. Appreciate you so much. I work with an amazing team at the WCEC. They deserve a lot of this love. But today I'm excited to introduce my sister. But first, I'm going to say a quick introduction. Sio Nagata, Dr. Tiffany Smith, Dawado, Chichalagi. Hello, everyone, relatives. My name is Tiffany Smith, she, her, hers. I'm Cherokee and I'm Muskogee from Oklahoma, where I currently reside today. Blanchard, Oklahoma is where I live and learn and teach, and where I'm zooming in from at this moment. And that sits on the ancestral and modern day homelands of the Comanche, Kiowa, Osage, Wichita, and affiliated tribes. So I'm excited to be introducing this topic and to talk a little bit about ACES. So I serve as the Director of Research and Career Support for ACES. And ACES, if you're not familiar with it, but I would love to see some shout outs in the chat for those that are involved with ACES, perhaps list any programs that you are already involved with, or if you've attended a national conference, yay. It's a national nonprofit organization focused on substantially increasing the representation of Indigenous peoples across North America and the Pacific Islands in STEM, right? Science, technology, engineering, and math studies and careers. So I love the work that I get to do. I've worked for ACES for 3.5 years now. And it is my passion, my heart work every day to work across the holistic pathway of serving, PK-12 students all the way up through our professional level. And so we have departments that serve all of our students. So if you're ever interested in coming to an ACES conference, check out aises.org. We have our next conference will be in October in Minneapolis, Minnesota. So I see lots of shout outs in the chat. This makes me excited and it energizes me to see all of the sister love and the rematriation love. I also would be remiss if I didn't give a shout out to Maddie Haybeck, who's on this call, who is Cherokee and Adopted Osage, who serves as our career support program officer and also runs the programming for our Rematriation Indigenous Women in STEM program. So Maddie, I didn't know if you wanted to say a quick hello to everyone, but I feel like she should also be recognized in this space.
Sure. Hello, all. My name is Maddie Haybeck. As Tiffany said, I'm a career support program officer with ACES, coming up on 3 years. I am really excited to be here and get to hear the incredible wisdom of Sunny. So I'm excited you all get to learn from her as well, because she is just a gem. So thank you all for having me and thank you for being here.
What up, Maddie? All right, now let's move on to what we're all here for. So I get to introduce my sister, who I met through our Love for the Rematriation program. She served on our advisory committee. She also serves as a rematriation mentor. and just a major advocate. And you'll see that in her work, and you'll hear from her today, particularly for women of color in STEM and tech careers. So Sunny Myers is a proud citizen hang on, I'm sorry, I got to move my screen, of the Lumbee and Sappony tribes, and an experienced global leader, recognized for her commitment to driving lasting change through a data-driven approach and extensive executive level stakeholder engagement. Awarded the 2024 ACES Blazing Flame Professional Award, she is more than just an employee advocate. She is an engagement catalyst, community builder, and change agent. Sunny has collaborated with Melinda French Gates and has spoken at high-profile events, including Grace Hopper, ACES National Conference, Lesbians Who Tech and Allies Pride Summit, ERG Leadership Conference, and Women in Cybersecurity National Conference, among others. She strives to create inclusive spaces that value and welcome the unique perspectives of all humans. Outside of her professional life, Sunny is a mama bear, a fry bread lover, a rugby coach, and a collector of fly kicks, which that is so true. I'm always trying to see what kicks and bright clothes and blazers Sunny's wearing the next time. So without further ado, I'd love to pass it off for this amazing webinar to my dear sister, colleague, friend, Sunny Myers.
Awesome. Hey, y'all. I am so excited to be here. My name is Sunny Myers. I thank you for the warm welcome, Tiffany, and thank you to the WCEC for having these conversations and holding these spaces. This is such a sacred space where we can come together and we can learn and grow and heal together. And thank you for the attendees. I love seeing you all in the chat. I saw some familiar names and where you're from. I am sitting on the traditional homelands of our Tuscarora relatives in what is now known as Raleigh, North Carolina. We just really thank you for showing up today. There are so many other places and spaces you could be in today, but you making a choice to be here, I trust that I take that with trust and care. And I love that you're already saying, what is rematriation? We will get into that. But before we do, sorry, I'm gonna share my screen, get all prepped. I would love to see in the chat if you can see that okay, because you know how it is over here. You can't see it. Everybody good? Awesome, we can see it. We're off to a good, I am a technologist, but sometimes the technology doesn't love me. We all know how that goes. All right, we're gonna have a grounding. So before we jump in the content, I want to just acknowledge that some of what we'll discuss today may be triggers. It may bring up challenging feelings and memories. We're here to hold space for each other in the fullness of our experiences. But I understand that everyone comes with their own stories and your own sensitivities. If at any moment you need to step away, please do so. There's no need to explain it. You don't need to comment on the chat. There's absolutely no judgment here. Take care of yourself and whatever feels right for you. You're welcome to return at any point that you feel ready, or take as much quiet time as you need. This space is for you. So listen to yourself and prioritize what you need. I also want to clarify that I am an engineer by trade and not a lawyer. So I'm not going to give you legal advice. But if you have any questions of legal nature, I encourage you to consult a qualified legal professional who can offer guidance. So let's move through this conversation together with care and compassion. So I'd love to start by checking in with you. If you're willing to share, could you put one word in the chat to describe how you're showing up today and feeling about this topic that we're going to be discussing? I wish I had some music, but I'm not that talented to do all that. Curious, expectant, excited, open-minded, empowering, interested. I love that. Ready. All right, we'll keep those coming, and I'm going to be conscious of our time together. I'm going to try to. So my why. I'm always thinking it's important to share why I'm here today and why I might not be an expert on this conversation, but why I think it's important to be sharing this and through my lived experiences and what I can bring to the table. So during my career as an electrical engineer, I had many positive moments. I did really cool things. I built really cool stuff. I led brilliant teams. I created some awesome, innovative, and new technologies and broke glass ceilings. I also experienced some harm in the workplace. Early on, I didn't have the tools or the knowledge or the courage or the support to articulate what I was experiencing at the time. I did, however, had my people. Being one of the only women engineers and the only Native American woman, I would often hear comments about my appearance, about my clothes I was wearing, about my earrings, because y'all know I always have some fly earrings, about my shoes. I did often wear heels or wedges or booties because that's what felt good to me and what I thought I looked fly in and gave me my self-esteem. But I was told one time that I wouldn't be able to do my job because I couldn't go to the clean room in those shoes. Little did they know that I had a pair of kicks and socks in my desk drawer, fly kicks, let me tell you. And I was ready for any environment. They just made assumptions and oftentimes didn't even invite me to the areas I needed to do my work in because of those assumptions were made. I drove a black F-150, and one time I was in the parking lot. It was kind of this time of year where it gets dark early on. And I was walking back into the building and I heard someone yell from the parking lot pretty far away. I see you drive a big black truck. Why don't you drive my big black D? I realized that I was also drastically paid way far less in like the 30K range than my peers, and I had been for years. Another day, another comment was said to me, and I was in the clean room and didn't know who said it. And I just drove home. I literally broke in complete tears. I sat in my driveway and I just was bawling. And I called my sponsor and my friend on the way home, who was a white guy executive in my same organization. And I told him that I was planning to resign. I couldn't bear this burden anymore. I couldn't take the harm and the hurt and endure this. And he said, I wouldn't blame you for quitting, not one bit. And I want to support you in whatever you want to do. But you have options. And I was like, what options do I have? I have to go find a new job. But I was so worried about supporting my family as a primary provider, also health insurance. We all know how big a deal that is. And I could not have the burden of carrying this pain and this harm, but also having the burden of providing for my family. And he said, let's go explore your options. And so he encouraged me to go to my HR and my manager and tell them to share my experiences and to put a severance on the table that I could take anywhere for the next 6 months. And I was like, that's a thing. He was like, it is going to be a thing. And so I walked in that following Monday. I told them about my experiences. I was able to share as much as I could. I didn't have very thorough documentation, but we'll go through that. And I said, I want a severance on the table because I don't know if I can survive this. And that was a really pivotal moment for me. And so here I am. I want to share why my purpose is. It's to equip you that if you ever experience or you have experienced harm and misconduct in the workplace, you feel empowered in your decision making and you have options. So let's go through some definitions. And because we're all nerds in this space, I thought it might be, I'll prepare some data. So the goodness of our heart, but let's go through some definitions before we do so. We make sure we're aligned in terminology. So rematriation, why rematriation and rise? So in Indigenous communities, rematriation is a form of healing. It means a return to the motherland, a return to our sacred Mother Earth in all her glory, a return to our ancestral womb, our ancestral traditions, cultivating and increasing our capacity to love and to be loved, and restoring our own liberation. Rematriation is often led by Indigenous women. No surprise there, right? We are badasses. Rematriation involves reclaiming and reconnecting Indigenous peoples with their cultural heritage, land, traditions, and values. This process supports the healing of both the individual and our communities, and from the impacts of colonization by restoring a sense of identity, belonging, and pride. Through rematriation, sacred items, ceremonies, language, traditional practices are returned to the rightful places and people, helping to heal the trauma. This healing is also not only personal, but it's beautiful because it's collective. It roots in resilience. I literally got goosebumps every time I say this. Reestablishing community ties and supporting mental, emotional, and spiritual well-being. By reconnecting to our land, our traditional foods, our knowledge, and our indigenous communities, we can restore balance and strengthen their cultural foundations for us and for future generations. I look at learning opportunities like this as rematriation work, a place of refuge, a place of rest, and a place of restoration. We are all resilient. We are badass women of color in engineering, but we do not have to carry that as a badge of honor. We can come together as a community and as sisters, as my aunties, as my elders, as my relatives, and we can heal. We fall, we break, we fail, but then we heal and we rise. So what is discrimination? You can read the description there, but examples are paying women less than some of the same work that men do, firing an employee because of discussing their pay with a coworker, being unfairly labeled as aggressive or intimidating for assertive behavior that would be praised by others, and being excluded from informal networks and high visibility projects that lead to advancement. What is harassment? So examples of harassment may include inappropriate jokes or comments, unwanted physical contact, threats, displays of discriminatory images or symbols, microaggressions. And what is a microaggression? I'm very thankful that this term is really used more widely now, but have you heard, you look so exotic. You are so articulate. Where are you really from? You are in a direct meeting and you're as labeled as angry or aggressive. Black women, can I touch your hair? Can I touch your braids, Indigenous women? Is your really hair naturally straight, Latino women? How many of us have been interrupted or cut off? Those are microaggressions. And what is bias? It's more widely known term now, again, thankfully, but it refers to unfair or unjust assumptions and stereotypes. And we have over 200 biases that exist, and those can be conscious or unconscious. What's retaliation? In the workplace, it's when an employer or a coworker punishes an employee for reporting discrimination, harassment, or other protected activities, and it is illegal. All right, fellow nerds, let's unpack some data about experiences women of color in the workplace have compared to white women. This data is from an extensive, I think it's a 148-page report, 2022 of workplaces experience of women of color in the tech study from the work life law out of the University of California, Hastings College of the Law. I want to share a couple important notes about the data. While this report focuses solely on the tech industry, we see very similar trends in broader women in the workplace studies like Lean In, Catalyst, McKinsey. There's been an increased number of representation of women across multiple industries, but the percentage of women in tech has actually declined over the last 3 decades, with women of color being even further underrepresented. A prevailing narrative about diversity in computing is that it's a pipeline problem. And yes, we do have a pipeline problem, but we also see the leaky bucket problem. It's clearly also a culture problem. And many women of color who earn their degrees in computing either never enter the field or leave the industry altogether before their mid-career. Attrition is much higher among women than any men in tech. Early career women are leaving the tech industry twice the rate of men. And one study found that over half mid-career women leave the industry. So this is why we're taking a look at the data. It's critical. So let's get into it. So a lot of data on the screen. The TLDR. Women of color report facing more bias than white women. The experiences of women of color differentiated by racial and ethnic groups, but one pattern was consistent. The reports of all groups, women of color, tended to cluster together and far away from white women. Women of color have to prove themselves repeatedly. It's called prove it again bias, in order to get the same kind of respect and recognition of the work at a level 23.4 percentage points higher than white women. And women of color had to walk a tightrope to counter unspoken expectations. I think we all know what those are. But for example, they were more likely to report being interrupted, actually 17.9% points higher than white women, and more likely to get negative reactions to justified anger, 13.3% points higher. I love this, but as noted by Patricia Collins, Black women hold an outsider within status in the workplace. Their life and culture expectations lead to perspective that it is odds with the majority of white male workplace because they do not fit the expectation of what someone in tech should be. I actually have a sweatshirt that says tech looks like me, and I think we should all wear it and wear it often. Black women have to put in more time and work to navigate office politics in the way that white men and white women do not. So this is the tug-of-war bias. Biased environments lead to conflicts among women of color. For example, they were more likely to report if they were worried if they supported another member of their group, if it would be construed as favoritism. And tug-of-war bias occurs when bias against a group creates conflict within it. An example would be a woman who joins the good old boys club, may seen as their advantages to their career, whereas women who align with other women don't. Women of color face negative racial and ethnic stereotypes at work at a level 51.1 percentage points higher than white women. Women of color also had to contend with being viewed as a representative of their group than being recognized for their professional expertise at a substantial higher rate than white women. And workplace bias and harm can be subtle, but it also could be very apparent and explicit. Women of color reported experiencing sharper high levels of racism at work, a 46.3% point difference. Women of color reported high levels of sexism at a much higher rate than white women surveyed. And while dealing with racism and sexism at work, women of color are more likely to report that they had to put in way more energy into navigating the situation so they wouldn't face retaliation. So here we are again, another way of women of color having to work harder than anyone else. Over 2/3 of women in our study reported some form of sexual harassment, and nearly a quarter reported unwanted physical contact, and almost 10% reported having lost opportunities like promotion or career enhancing assignments due to sexual harassment. So this looks like the employee life cycle, and it's no surprise that all the data and experiences we just looked at that were reported affect the employee life cycle processes: hiring, retention, promotion, and pay of women, and also termination. So the facts here. Women of color reported the same issues in hiring as we see in the company's data that's out there. Start Googling websites and what you see, and this is the why. Women of color reported that people like themselves don't have an equal shot at getting hired at the organizations as a much higher rate and level than white women. Women of color reported getting fair performance evaluations at a lower rate than white women. And women of color are less likely to be promoted to senior positions. And lastly, the pay gap in tech is so well documented. Women of color get paid less, period. Okay, that was a lot of data. We promise we will send these resources out so you can dig deeper into that. But I want to share all of this to say, you are not alone. And it is not your fault. The systems are broken. You are not. You belong here, and we need you here. And if you don't take anything else away from today, please take this with you. You are not alone, and it is not your fault. So what can we do about it? I think for me, this was I would say I learned this later on, but work in the workplace and an organization is not your family. I think I had a great friend who was like, they're not my family. I don't show up in boxer shorts and like what I would wear, and they don't want to smell my morning breath. They're not my family. So it's little things like that to reframe. Workplace is not your family. Oh, I see some comments about the data, so we'll share it out. And so, but it was a huge game changer for me to continue to say this. And honestly, it's a boundary that I use still today. Your company is a business and they make business decisions in order to be profitable, which we need them to. We all want to make our money and stay employed. We need them to be focused on business. You work for them and they really owe you a paycheck. And that's about it in America, unfortunately. But you can create clear boundaries and reset your expectations. You are not defined by your workplace. You are a brilliant human, and your brand, your values, your skill set will follow you wherever you go, and no one can take that away from you. So you determine your core values. One of my core values is community, and I never compromise on community. And don't ever compromise on your values either, ever. Write them down, read them out loud often, make decisions on who you're gonna go work for based on those values. This is non-negotiable. My little ones always try to tell me, so I have I have 4 kids, but 2 little boys that are in the state of like, they love, hate each other, more hate sometimes than love. And I always have to say, you know, who's the boss of you? And they're like, myself. And so I'm like, you're the boss of yourself. I say it like all the time. It's like my catchphrase. And the same goes for you. You're the boss of yourself. Be loyal to yourself. Be selfish in your decisions. And at the end of the day, you have to look out for you. The company is got to look out for the company. And while you have to develop you can develop meaningful relationships with colleagues and peers. I sure have friends in the workplace. Calling your work your family can actually breed burnout and can be detrimental to your own mental and emotional health. So protect yourself. Acknowledge the harm. It sounds so simple when it's words on a page, but we all know how complex and difficult this actually is in practice. You taking ownership of your own experiences, articulating what is, how it made you feel, gives you power to the opportunity to heal on your own terms. Workplace trauma and harm is real. And as women of color, you've probably experienced it. Experiencing harm, harassment, or discrimination in the workplace is deeply challenging and isolating experience. If you are struggling with emotional distress, as a result of the experiences, it's important that you know the resources available to you and you access those. So my first step is to seek out to someone that you trust and who loves you. This might be friends, family members, sisters, relatives, or a partner. These people can provide emotional support and comfort. Maybe it's just a hug. Maybe it's just check-ins. Maybe it's like door coffee. My partner brought me door coffee today and it was the sweetest check-in. But it really matters. And so go to them first and ask and tell them what you need. A mental health professional like a counselor or a therapist is also really good. It's a safe and confidential space for you to process your own feelings and work through any short-term and long-term effects you may be facing. They can also provide coping strategies and tools to help you manage your distress. You have to take care of yourself. We need you here. This may include getting enough sleep, exercising regularly, engaging in self-care activities that bring you joy, because you deserve joy, and relaxation as you're going through the process. Document everything, and I really mean everything. It's important to take steps to protect yourself and create a record of what is happening. Your experiences are real. Here are some important tips that I would keep in mind. Be so thorough in your documentation. So thorough. It's like the one-page calculus problem that you have to do. Like, yes, that's your documentation. Make sure to record it, your timelines of events, the location, any witnesses involved, any other details of the incident. Were you in the office? What room were you in the office? There might be cameras. Make sure you write every single detail down and word for word if you remember. It can make a huge difference when we're calling specific events, and it will stop you from being gaslit. Well, it might not stop you from being gaslit, but then you can just put them in their place when they try to gaslight you. It's key to have accurate and detailed notes. It's also important where you're storing this information. Do not store it on your work computer, ever. Use it on a personal device. Make sure it's backed up, a notebook, anything that you see that is safe for your records. Because if it's on your work computer, it could potentially be accessed by your employer or used against you. Email any pieces of evidence to your personal email to keep them secure. This ensures that you access it to outside of the workplace, and it's safely stored in case you need to reference on legal purposes later on. If the behavior or incidents involve Slack or chat messages, text, emails, or anything digital really, take screenshots and save them in a secure locations. Screenshots of text or emails provide a concrete record that can validate your experiences, and when you have to establish a clear narrative, it helps. In some cases, recording audio or video may be possible and useful for capturing verbal exchanges or actions. However, you have to be aware of your state's recording laws, and it differs. Some states can require consent from all parties, and some states it's just a one-party consent. Keep copies of your performance evaluations and documents that show your quality of work. These materials can help demonstrate your professional competence, and it can also be essential when you need to counteract claims that the harm was due to your performance issues. Also, if there needs to be a case for retaliation, you have that evidence. The most important thing to remember is that your safety is the top priority. No one should feel unsafe or threatened where they work, and taking steps to protect yourself is absolutely critical. Even if it feels appropriate or safe to do so, consider directly addressing the harasser and telling them to stop in clear terms, and that their behavior is unwelcome and needs to stop. You may say something like, "I'm uncomfortable with what you're doing and you need to stop." Be calm, be direct, and stick to I statements. Do this in writing if possible. Again, only if you are safe. And remember that you don't have to confront anyone if it feels unsafe or uncomfortable. The priority here being your well-being, so proceed in whatever feels right to you. So every company should have a policy regarding workplace behavior, harassment, and discrimination. Start by reading your employees' policies now, not when the incidents happen, and make sure you know them thoroughly, and save a copy of that. And those policies may outline specific steps for reporting and management complaints that you have to take. Keep a personal copy and refer to them often as needed. Filing a formal complaint, and I hate in HR and people team, we use the word complaint, but it's actually called a complaint instead of a report, can be a crucial step. But it also may be beneficial to seeking legal counsel before you actually formally do that. A lawyer can provide guidance around tailored to your situation, making sure that you have thorough documentation, and help you understand your actual legal rights and implications. If it's appropriate and safe, confide in your manager about what's happening. Having their awareness may open pathways to support or intervention, especially if a manager isn't directly involved in the situation. The HR people team is typically responsible for addressing workplace conduct issues. Document your conversation with them. Do not have a phone conversation, and if you do, follow up directly in an email about your conversation. And make them be clear about the actions that they're going to take and the resolutions you're seeking. The EEOC exists to protect against workplace discrimination, and you have a right to file a complaint with the EEOC if you believe you're facing discrimination. If you decide to file a complaint with the EEOC or another agency, be mindful of deadlines. Some states have specific timeframes for reporting incidents. Some workplaces offer anonymous reporting mechanisms. Not all of them do, actually, but that might be through hotlines or online portals. And so if you're a witness to discrimination or harassment, you might want to report it. Or if you're seeing it yourself or experiencing it yourself, you can report it anonymously if that's an option. This can be such a safe way to raise concerns, especially if you're uncomfortable revealing your identity. And finally, be informed about your state laws regarding workplace harassment and discrimination. You make a formal report. They call it a complaint. What happens next? So different companies have different procedures. Generally, the employer will investigate the claim. This means they're going to have some time to talk to an internal, external investigator. The investigator will usually do an interview with the person who was harassed, you, and the witnesses. Some employers may move the harasser away from you during the investigation. If the investigation finds that harassment happened or discrimination happened, the employer's response will depend on what the type is and what the sanctioning of that employee or employees are. And then that's really, though, up to the employer's procedures. So what if you're too scared to report? That is super common. I was scared too. In fact, I don't report a lot of things. So that's okay. You have a few options. You can do the anonymous report by the phone numbers. You can get help of other organizations that support workers' rights. But like if you reported, so what if you reported something and nothing happened? It went silent. What should you do? So this is where the legal counsel would come into hand. You can discuss your situation with the attorney and a free consultation. They have actually free consultations through some services I'll provide at the end, or you can ask your employee for the update on your complaint. Do that in writing. You can take legal action. You do not have to have a lawyer to report what happened to you, to the employer, or to the EEOC, but it can really be helpful. Personally, I would consult a lawyer before ever filing any formal complaint. And the great news is the National Women's Law Center, through the Legal Network for Gender Equity, provides free consultations and matching you with a lawyer. You can walk away. Deciding to leave an organization is never easy, and there is no shame in that decision. Sometimes protecting your own peace, stepping away is the best choice for you, and don't let anybody tell you otherwise. If you're in a position where you feel unsupported or unsafe or repeatedly facing those, you have a couple choices. Before leaving, ensure that you have copies of all your documentation related to your experiences. Consult with a legal expert or career advisor so you can get some clarity on your rights and if you can go back to pursue any actions. Craft a professional exit letter that briefly outlines why you're leaving. Document everything. And plan your transition by identifying the next steps in your career. Where do you need to go? Do you need to find a role? There's also things like taking leave. FMLA is available at most organizations. Take advantage of those things to exist to protect your peace. Walking away from a difficult workplace is another step towards healthier experiences and new opportunities. And you have to prioritize your safety and your happiness, and you will never regret doing so. So as we wrap up, I want to share a couple closing remarks and offer a space to release some of the emotions you may be feeling. Reminder, healing takes courage, and we all have that courage, even if we have to dig a little deeper to find it. You are not alone, and it is not your fault. You will rise again. I know it might not feel like that in the deep valley of hard and hurt that you're in, but I promise you that you will rise again, and you will grow, and you will learn, and you will endure, and you will rise. So at this time, before we turn it back over to Dr. Tiffany Smith, aka my sister, we're going to open it up and do some Q&A. I want us to close our eyes and take some deep breaths together. Many of us are carrying a lot of grief right now. In fact, I feel like I'm carrying the grief of the world. Let's be intentional about restoring our spirits one breath at a time. So on the inhale, we're going to take 3 breaths. I want you to take in everything you need: healing, courage, support. And on the exhale, I want you to focus on pushing the breath all the way through your feet, releasing whatever is not serving you: harm, grief, anger, fear, anxiety. I want you to focus on firmly grounding yourself. So let's try it. Eyes closed. Inhale, hold, exhale, push that breath all the way through your feet. Inhale, hold, exhale, push that breath all the way through your feet. Inhale, exhale. And if you're willing, please share one word in the chat about how you're feeling right now. And as you type, I want to just say thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your energy. And thank you again to my WCEC sisters for inviting me into this sacred space today. Tiffany, you want to come back on for some Q&A?
You bet. Thank you so much, sister. That was amazing. Lots of great advice, and I'm seeing tons of comments, so I'm trying to keep up on all of this. Let's go up to the question. So I had somebody ask about crafting a letter that you mentioned. I'm wondering what the reason is to document where you said craft a professional letter, why you are leaving, if you are leaving.
Yeah, so just good practice. Whenever you leave, you want to put that always in writing. So oftentimes if you tell your manager leaving, they're like, great, can you send an exit letter? And you usually have the conversation and then you send the exit letter immediately before the conversation. And so you're going to take that same approach, but you're going to document. You don't have to share why you're leaving, but if you are leaving and trying to take action later, then that letter needs to probably include why you're leaving. I hope that answers that.
Yes,
It can
thank
be
you,
very
Sunny.
general. It doesn't need to be specific, but it might need to say, I was experiencing workplace harm and I'm taking some time.
Yeah, I think I agree with document as backup. So I think that's good advice. All right, I had somebody else ask, how can you balance self-advocacy while protecting your mental health?
Therapy.
Mm.
I do think like it's finding your own practices. So self-care to me looks differently than self-care to you. I mean, we do share a lot of self-care. We go shopping for earrings, but no, but really, you know, for me, I take my shoes off. I go in my yard often. I actually just find one with Mother Earth and just spend time with her. And so when I'm feeling triggered, when I'm feeling unsettled, that is a huge self-care. One of the other practices I do is when I sit in conversations or in experiences that something's being projected, but I feel like I don't need to own that, I physically get up and wash my hands. And so you might be on a Zoom call and somebody's projecting their negative energy or attitude or whatever harm onto you. And it might not fall in the realms of discrimination and harassment, but it's still negative energy that you don't need to own. Physically washing your hands and not owning that and dismissing that energy is just a great spiritual practice. I know us Indigenous sisters, we do a lot of smudging. And so sometimes I'll be on calls that I'm like prep for, and then the sage smoke or the cedar smoke will come through and they're like, is your house on fire? I'm like, yes, it is. No, but you know, we're burning it all down. But you know, it really, it just whatever those traditional or sacred practices are for you in your culture. And if you don't have those, that's okay. But fine, maybe it's going for a walk. I really feel like self-care looks like different for everyone. That being said, you have to like be connected with the fire to take action. And so that's where it becomes with like accountability partners. That's where I need like, you know, my own partner, my own friends, my own sisters that I can trust in this space who are going to support me and also hold me accountable when I just feel like giving up.
I feel like perhaps you shared some of this already, and so some of this can intersect, but someone asked, what are some practical ways that women of color can take to start healing from workplace harm?
Yeah. I think once I started to acknowledge the bigger things that were happening, all of the smaller things that had happened that I just didn't like either forgot about or I just kind of passed through or dismissed subconsciously or consciously started to come up for me. And so that's where I'm big on, finding a mental health professional, because I was able to process those and then understand the why. And so there are some environments I'd sit on and somebody says something, or they dismiss me right away. And I'm like, oh, hold my earrings. Right. And I was like, why am I doing that? Like, that body shifts. I can tell you when my body physically shifts, what that feels like. And so understanding why that is and where you can make adjustments and being able to name those feelings and emotional distresses were so important to me, because I can solve really complex math and engineering problems, but to name my feelings is it was difficult for me.
Absolutely. Well, we had some other questions about, does it ever get better? Or do we always need to leave? How do we identify places where these biases are less prevalent?
Yeah, I think you can always reach out to me. I ask a lot of intentional questions. I don't think any workplace is perfect, and I don't think that's the expectation, but I think it needs to align with your core values. And I also think that you will get different or need different things in workplaces based on the season of life you're in. And so I can share my own personal experience. My next role that I took back in tech, I was like, should I go to the nonprofit sector? And I have a lot of opportunities. And I was like, I think I want to go back to tech, and everything's swirling in tech right now. You're like, you're crazy, Sunny. But something was drawing me there. But I knew I didn't want the senior role. I knew I didn't want this unrealistic work-life balance that was draining me. It was draining me of all of my energy. I wasn't seeing my family. And so I wanted a role that I could do really good work. I had a protection layer, like a good manager who believed in me, who could kind of shoulder that. I didn't want to own everything under the sun. And I wanted to be acknowledged for the work I was doing. And so that also came with a lower salary. And I had to kind of grasp that, if this is what I'm looking for based on the needs and the values, then I'm going to have to accept that comes at a lower salary band, because the responsibilities were justified with that. And so that's a choice. Sometimes you are going for that more senior level position and you're putting in that work. And so the workplace and what it's going to bring you during that time is way different. It might be I'm doing this for a skip level. I'm going to get in, I'm going to do 2 years or 3 years, or I'm going to get out, or you're looking for a long-term commitment there. So you really have to write down what you're looking for exactly in that workplace. And willing to walk away or say no. I mean, I had roles that I was like, this is a dream job 2 years ago. Now it's a hard no for me.
Yeah. Well, and I feel like that's taking back control in our own ways too, right? Like that control can feel very healing and peaceful to have that.
Oh.
Yeah,
and people, it's funny when they meet with me now, they're like, you have such a different energy in this season. I was like, because I do have the control. It is a choice to show up to work every day. Am I so excited? I'm dealing with procurement right now. I am not the happiest human in the world, right? Yeah. I'm like, oh, I actually, somebody's like, oh, I was like, it's been a week. I have to deal with procurement. But ultimately, I have way more good days than bad. I enjoy the people I work with. I like the work that I'm doing. I have influence and impact, and people come to me. Those are the things I'm looking for. I'm not wanting to work an 80-hour week, right? I want to be able to have a workplace that supports me doing things like this.
Yes.
That's where I want to be.
I feel that. So if a colleague says something that is considered racist, for instance, you speak with an accent, how would a woman of color speak with them respectfully to address the issue, if they even feel comfortable enough to do so?
I always like to respond with a question. What did you mean by that? Right? Did you know that's offensive? I think often with our people, Tiffany, there's a lot of people say well, let's go have a powwow about XYZ. So I'm pretty witty, and I say back, well, should I bring my regalia? And they don't even know what that is. And they're like, well, what's the regalia? What do you mean? And I'm like, well, you said a powwow. Should I wear my traditional clothing and do a jingle dress dance? And they're like, what do you mean? And so it checks them really quick, and it's also really witty, and we kind of can move on. I'm also at a point in my career where I'm more spicy than not. And so just to kind of realize that that's not where you're at, but I do love responding with inappropriate comments with putting it back on them to correct their own. What did you mean by that? Tell me more. Like, that was hurtful. Can you help me understand why you said that? Can you help me understand XYZ is a brilliant way to say what you're going to say without having to say it directly or it coming back to harm you.
Let's have one more question before Kanisha closes us out. So someone asked, how can supervisors support the healing process for impacted women of color?
Yeah, listen, ask them how they're doing instead of making sure that they're always coming to you. Do check-ins, be really intentional with your questions. If you see it in action, interrupt. There's a great training on bias interrupters. I highly recommend it. Be proactive about your support of them. And I think Will and I were discussing this, and as you climb the ranks as a woman of color, it's your obligation to not show up in the harm to the workplace as maybe showed up for you until you do better. And so do make sure you're doing your own work in this space so you can show up better for others. Well, the first time I met with my therapist, and doing this work and shifting from this engineering, very technical mindset, I was like pouring out myself and I was constantly exhausted and I had no energy and I was not kind to my family. And I was like, how do you sustain yourself? And she was like, I cannot show up for you to take your energy on and your hormone if I'm not filling my own cup up. This work is drastically different. It's not how hard or how smart you are, right? You have to approach this with care for yourself first because you cannot care for others if you don't care for yourself. And I think the same applies for being a supervisor.
Tiffany, I thank you so much for asking that question because I was going to try to squeeze it in somehow because there were a couple of questions around how we hold the organizations or the systems accountable to workplace harm. So thank you so much for sliding that in. But woo, Sunny, yo, this was so golden. Thank you so much for coming in. It felt like an informal chat, to be honest. I know you gave like some statistics and all the good jazz, but I saw some comments around like feeling the data in their bones or like just some other testimonials around workplace harm. So I thank you so much for curating the space. Even though it was an hour, I wish it was kind of longer. But the content was definitely good. I saw some questions around if this recording, if it'll be available after the fact. Yes, it'll be on our YouTube channel, our social media platforms and newsletters. But I just wanted to hop on and say thank you so much to both Sunny, Tiffany, and also Maddie for the collaboration of making this space what it is. For our upcoming webinar, the WCEC will be collaborating with the National Society of Black Engineers to celebrate Black History Month in February. At this time, as we close out, I'd like to remind you that you can connect with the WCEC via LinkedIn or via our newsletter. There's going to be a couple of links that are being placed in the chat as we speak. But we're hoping that you subscribe to our newsletter to get updates on all of our programming. I would also like to invite you all to take a few moments to take our feedback survey. We'll stay on a little bit after the hour to give you the chance to do that. We're hoping that you will let us know some useful information, what areas could we improve on, and other things that you would like to see for future WCEC webinars. Again, I wanted to remind you all that the travel stipend application closes today at 5 p.m. Central Standard Time. And then also, if you go to our website, you'll not only see information about our website, newsletter, travel stipend, you'll also see the application for our profiles database. So you can click on that link to find out more information. And if there's any questions or concerns as it relates to programming for the WCEC, please reach out to us via email at wcec.programs@swe.org. Sorry, there's a couple of emails running through my head, but as mentioned, we're going to drop some useful links in the chat, and I want to thank you all for taking an hour out of your busy schedule to be in community with us as we're speaking about healing from workplace harm. Again, Sunny, thank you so much. Tiffany, Maddie, all y'all, thank you for the collaboration from this. Our record-breaking attendance definitely showed that this is a exciting topic that folks are wanting to lean more into. So y'all can just stare at me for a few seconds if you need to complete the survey, but otherwise I hope you have a great weekend.